Welcome to Groundwork, a podcast from McClanahan Corporation to talk about key material processing topics, from agriculture to mining to material recycling. We'll discuss the best ways to process the raw materials that power the world, because if it's not growing, it's mined. Hi everybody, I'm Neil Mullan, Director of Sales for C&D Recycling in North America for McClanahan Corporation. And today's podcast is titled The Importance of Recycled Aggregate in Driving Sustainability. And we're very blessed to have two fantastic guests with us today, Lauren Asfour and John Thomas, both key members of the Construction, Demolition and Recycling Association, or CDRA as we like to call it in short. Lauren, maybe if you can start, just give us a little intro, your background and involvement in the CDRA.
Thank you, Neil, for the introduction and inviting us on the podcast today. My name is Lauren Asfour. I work for Basilico Materials. We're a construction recycling company. We've got 11 different facilities that do both concrete recycling, asphalt production and recycling, as well as soil washing. I've also been a member of the CDRA for the last 5 years and was put on the board within the last few months, as well as starting to chair their aggregate recycling committee. So that's been a very exciting development as well. So I'm looking forward to being on the podcast with you guys and being able to chat a little bit about that.
Perfect. Thank you, Lauren. And John, could you give us an intro?
Certainly. Good morning, everybody. John Thomas, WRS. Been involved in the C&D recycling world for 30 plus years. Part of a group of associations that support the responsible recycling of not just aggregates, but other C&D type materials. Currently the sitting president of the CDRA, the CDAO, which is Construction and Demolition Association of Ohio, and the Recycling Certification Institute, which is a third-party audit to pretty much affirm the correct recycling rates that facilities are putting out to the public.
Very good. And John, could you give us some history into the CDRA, describe who they are and how long have they been involved in recycling?
Sure. The CDRA has been around for about 32 years now. It was founded by a gentleman named Bill Turley that was passionate about, connecting people that are like-minded and had a vision of, responsible recycling and finding end markets for materials that were bound for the landfill. We have members in, I believe, 9 countries now. And we have a really good group of collaborators, not just on the board, but as a membership base as a whole. And we get together a couple times a year, and we have an annual event that we bring in a very large amount of people every spring. This year happens to be in January in Tampa, where we can you can come and enjoy panels of people that are in the business, in the grind every day, trying to find what's next, looking for technology. You get to talk to manufacturers, you get to talk to end market users, you get to talk to a whole bunch of, again, like-minded people that are just looking for solutions and really trying to do landfill diversion at its best and responsibly.
Yeah, we were at your last annual event in Dallas, and we had a booth, and I found it very valuable sharing the same room with companies and customers who are involved in other areas of recycling outside of aggregates. So we can learn things from those guys, and I hope that they can learn things from us as well, because traditionally our focus has been on minerals and aggregates, and we're very comfortable in that space. But I think once you sort of move into, or if you get involved in recycling, there's so many different contaminants in the materials, and there's other ways beyond the traditional methods of washing and separating materials that we're comfortable with or experienced with. But we always get little nuggets from whether it's air separation or it's metal recovery. There's so many companies that's really have been specializing in that field, which has a lot of benefit for us to interact with.
Yeah, I think it's important that people understand that, no matter what type of material it is, it typically can be recycled. It's just finding that sweet spot of technology, an end market, and some other variables that help get you there. But I will say that over the past, I don't know, I would say since Nashville in 17 or 18, there's been a pretty big push looking for, the washing technologies for aggregates in particular, which has taken off here in the East Coast for sure. But also C&D fines, trying to get the aggregates out of C&D fines and things of that nature. So the washing technologies have come a long way. And we've seen a lot more of the concrete washout type of demand lately, where before they would just dig a hole in the ground, the concrete trucks would just wash out the ground and cover it up. Now they're realizing that material can be recycled and taken back and made into virgin materials again. So it's kind of interesting to see that evolve.
Yeah, it's really interesting C&D recycling because there's so many different feed streams of materials that generally is considered a waste, but there's so much value. And if you just talk to the right company, they can provide a solution that's pretty straightforward for them. And maybe the concrete recyclers weren't aware. So that's the association, the CDRA. I see so much value in various industries getting involved in, because someone in that association probably has a solution to their problems. And to that point, Lauren, Basilico Materials, I'm sure you guys have come across some really difficult feed streams that you deal with on a day-to-day basis. Can you sort of describe, the what type of challenges and what types of feed materials that you see coming in through the gate?
Yeah, absolutely. So, just to reiterate, we do have two soil washing facilities, one that can take contaminated soils, environmentally contaminated soils, as well as clean soils, both in New Jersey and on Long Island. But I think something that we might not have fully understood the scope of when we were starting these facilities was just how large of a percentage of C&D waste would still be intermingled in these soils, especially because of our proximity to urban environments. So you see a ton of concrete, asphalt, metals, wood, potentially slag. The list really goes on, plastics. And that is a really large proportion of the waste stream that comes in, and it does require an extra level of recycling. The soil washing process doesn't, all it does is uncover what was there, right? So, as soon as you've washed off all of the soil and you get a pile of rocks, if you're not careful about how you're going about that washing process and careful about how you're doing your separation, you are going to have a pile that's intermingled with a lot of C&D waste. So we've had to take a careful look at our process and make sure that we're keeping our product quality high. At the end of the day, we are trying to make sellable recycled aggregate, and we want to make sure that has a minimum of concrete, a minimum of asphalt, as little metal as possible, of course, preferably none. And we make sure that concrete and asphalt gets an opportunity to be recycled as well. We luckily, as a company, are in both of those spaces with our other facilities. So we're able to kind of jockey that material back and forth to get recycled properly. But it is a consideration that we didn't necessarily see the full scope of when we started.
Mm-hmm. And would you have to be more prudent then about accepting material that's coming in? I mean, is there inspections on site, or is that done through paperwork before they even arrive on site?
Definitely both. We have a Part 360 permit with the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation. So with that comes the responsibility of pre-approving all the material that comes into the site. And that's really for an environmental perspective. We're not allowed to take hazardous waste, and we're doing our due diligence there. But we do ensure during that process that we're asking, where did this material originate from? And it kind of gives us a better look under the hood, right? What's going to be coming in this truck? Is it from an urban environment? Was it a roadway construction project? How did the material originate? Gives us a better idea of what we should expect. So it's either making the decision before the material comes to us, pricing a material appropriately to make sure that we're able to cover the extra processing costs that will come along with that, or even inspections at the gate, because we do have a scale house that has attendants that will be inspecting loads, as well as all the way down to the payloader operator, who, when they see that material being dumped in the yard, when they're going to mix it into the pile or go bring it into the plant, they will note, this entire load was filled with brick, or this had more concrete or rebar or tarps even than, we were anticipating and not necessarily prepared for, because it might not have been right at the top of the truck, or maybe people weren't so forthcoming with the information they provided during the approval process.
Yeah, I think, and John, I'll bring you in a second. I was just thinking, I think there's a thought out there that with C&D recycling, it's like a black magic box that you could put anything into it and it washes the material and it's so clean and you can make perfect products. But the important thing to know is understanding what you've got on site, processing wise, and making sure that the material that you feed your process is suitable. Otherwise, it's just going to be a nightmare to maintain, or you'd be pulling ropes and wires around shafts. So, I mean, it's very important to prep the material. It's very important to know the material that's even coming in through the gate in the first place. And really, it's to look after your equipment, it's to look after your operators and your business as its bottom line, I suppose, as well. But John, Basilico Materials on Long Island, I don't know, they might have been the first or one of the first companies, certainly that I'm aware of, that were washing considered C&D waste and recycling the materials to make aggregates. Is this, am I right in thinking the Basilico was one of the first? Is washing C&D waste a relatively new phenomenon in the East Coast?
Yeah, I would agree. I think that, there were some discussions. I remember going back in 2017 at a show where this concept was evolving, and Joe and I believe Matt at the time were involved in those conversations and kind of thinking about this hypothetical, um, you know, installation of this to support themselves, and also take on the needs of that market. I don't think they were the first in the country, but definitely the first in the East Coast, and I think they were second. Maybe I think there was a facility not as robust as Basilico's, which I've toured a couple times now, in Texas, but certainly Basilico, I would say, was the leading on the East Coast. And now we've seen a couple pop up since then. Again, not as elaborate as what's in Farmingdale there in Basilico, but you have repurposed aggregates down in Baltimore. You have eco materials now in Philadelphia, and there's a couple other ones. But I think I think that when Basilico did it, they had this vision and they did it right from the get go. And they spent what they needed to spend, and it was kind of you know overkill in the beginning, but it certainly has paid dividends since then. And I think the only thing, and Lauren, correct me if I'm wrong, the only thing that you guys may have added at the end, I wouldn't say at the end, but recently, the past couple of years, was grits and screenings separation process, right?
Yeah.
And I think that is something that everybody's missing the boat on too, because there's certainly a lot of aggregate material in those street sweepings and the hydrovacking, which is very popular on the East Coast because of underground utility strikes. So the hydrovacking market here is taken off, and I think they were ahead of that certainly before anybody else. And I don't know of anybody else doing that right now with the hydrovac and the street sweepings and the grits and screenings that you guys are doing.
Yeah, we were able to install that system in 2021, and it's been a huge success for us. First of all, it's a very safe way to dump that material as well, because a lot of the times these truck drivers will be getting out of their trucks, opening the back, and it's kind of dumping almost kind of like right on them otherwise, especially at these places where they just have a hole to dump into. We built a ramp with a hopper that they're able to dump into it, and it does seem counterintuitive, but you kind of introduce more water to dewater that material, and we've seen great success with that. But yeah, we get rave reviews, especially from the truck drivers, both from a safety perspective and a cleanliness perspective. They like that they leave there dry, and that their truck isn't a mess either. So that's a positive.
Have you seen a lot more hydro excavation being dumped at your site? I Yeah, it's really, but that's a booming industry right now, and saving a lot of underground utility strikes, and certainly keeping people a lot safer from possibly being electrocuted or hitting an underground gas line or something like that.
And the additional water is always a help. So with a traditional wash plant that has a thickener and a filter press, typically you still require 10% of makeup water. But if the hydrovac trucks are supplying that water for free, that saves 10% of your water costs, which is nice.
Absolutely. We do collect the rainwater on site as well, which was part of our permit requirements, but it has only benefited us.
Very good. John, I remember having a conversation with you a few months ago, and we were talking about the acceptance of recycled aggregates across North America, and it's pretty much widely accepted. I would say in New York, especially in Long Island, where there's limited natural resources left, so people are forced to use recycled. But in your travels, have you come across any examples where recycled materials has needlessly just been wasted? Not they're not recycled. They could be recycled, but they've generally just been disposed of.
Yeah, listen, at the end of the day, it's about the bottom line. So people are always looking for that cheapest option. Certainly we would like to see the industry as a whole, take a holistic look at recycling and the benefits of it. But yeah, I mean, I hate to say it, but in the day, you would just find your cheapest option and you go dump it on the ground and fill a hole in somewhere. And, I will say that's very difficult to do on the East Coast now with the regulations. And, you have the New York DEC and you got the A901 division in New Jersey. It's very tough to be able to, just get rid of material. I'll put it that way. And, I think the one thing that everybody doesn't have an appreciation for, Lauren touched on a little bit, but the review of the acceptance of this material is meticulous, and the costs associated with having the analyticals done and reviewed. And I have one sitting on my desk right now that's 1,800 pages for a 500,000 ton job. It is insane, the process, in particular, New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, as well, has to go through to even be able to accept that material. And then at the end of the day, if we can't, and it's low level contamination, depending on what a landfill in the area can take, that's where it goes. Um, to me, this is a great opportunity to preserve natural resources, be able to, be a little bit greener in these buildings that we're doing, and things of that nature. But, at the end of the day, with the exception of, and I don't know what Lauren's percentage is. I know what uh, repurposes is and ecos at this point, but they're kind of just getting off the ground. To see 70% of that diverted from a landfill and put back into use is incredible, in my opinion, compared to where we were. We were just finding holes to fill in the ground, and I don't think that was the best and safest mechanism to dispose of materials for the past 30 years.
And are those regulations for federal jobs, or are they for most jobs that they would have to be approved to sell or to use recycled?
Any job by state. I mean, it's
Yeah,
not really a federal regulation. It's what
by
your
state.
local EPA or New York DEC or New Jersey A901, and in Pennsylvania, it's a PADEP and the Act 90. There's so many. Each state has its own set of rules, and they have acceptance parameters that vary from state to state. But again, it also depends on the facility that you're trying to take it to. Where Basilico, it's not a landfill, it's not a hole in the ground, it's actually a recycling facility. So they have a set of rules that's much different than I would say some of the landfills in Pennsylvania. Certainly, in landfills in New Jersey are very restrictive on inbound material and soils and stuff, and would prefer, to be honest, to buy virgin material for cover and stuff like that before doing the work to take a recycled type material.
Is there landfills close by, Lauren, or is your location just at the perfect location to do recycling, being on Long Island? And I'm not sure the distance to the landfills, but obviously transport costs has a bearing on if it's if it's worthwhile to take it to a recycle facility or to a landfill facility. So location, I guess, is pretty important for these facilities.
Definitely it is. Trucking and disposal tends to be the leading reason why someone will choose a disposal location. The location that we're in on Long Island is greatly beneficial to us because anybody east of us, if they want to go to a New Jersey disposal location, they have to drive past us. So we can typically win them there. Anything that's um, in the city, it's most likely going to be cheaper to go to New Jersey, even if our disposal rate is low, just because the trucking will be higher. So there is definitely a balancing act there. Something that does benefit us on Long Island is that we are in our Long Island facility is that we can accept contaminated material. There's essentially no other location that can do that. So normally all of that material will need to go to New Jersey or Pennsylvania or potentially even farther away, depending on the constituents present that you would find out through doing the analyticals. But yeah, and with the location as well, that's one of the reasons why Long Island was so great for creating the soil washing facility, not just from being able to be a disposal location, but also from the just natural geology of the soil on Long Island. We're able to recover really high quality concrete sand and aggregate because they come from glacial till. Certain areas of the world, whether even on the East Coast or elsewhere, might not have that kind of gritty stone and sand that would come along with producing a really high quality material that could be used in asphalt and concrete production. And they might also have a much higher clay content. We're typically seeing anywhere from like 15 to 20% clay content on a typical job. Of course, there are exceptions to that, but it's just about pricing your jobs accordingly to make sure that your disposal rates will be covered. So our recovery rates typically around 80 to 85%.
Oh, very good. And John, in terms of a concrete washout, is that a sector which is crying out for a solution to recycle their waste concrete right now?
Yeah, there's a big push in New Jersey right now. I can tell you, it's for um, responsible disposal or recycling of that material. Between the silica dust and the ground contamination and everything associated with it. I mean, you've kind of seen it all here, where people use dumpsters, people used bags, and we've seen these little swimming pools pop up everywhere. But at the end of the day, if that material could be returned, to a place that could rewash it and pull the stove back out and the Portland and everything else, that it's a win for everybody. I wanted to touch on something that Lauren said that is a huge factor in the C&D industry right now, and that is the transportation. The transportation costs over the past, I don't know, 5 years, 10 years is astronomical. And to put things into perspective, to Lauren's point, if you wanted to bring material out of New York, not go to Lauren's facility and say, you know what, I'm going to go to this landfill down in South Jersey, and I'm not going to name the landfill, but it's used by a lot of people. Just the tolls to come out of the city, to come down the turnpike, to go to that landfill for a triaxle dump truck with 80,000 pounds is $185 just for the tolls. That's not fuel. That's not the driver. So, the East Coast is very hamstrung with toll roads. So you have to factor all that in. And certainly if you can find a local solution that's cheaper, that Basilico offers, not just in New York, but P Park in New Jersey as well, people flock to it because it makes sense. And the other big factor is, maybe they do. Maybe P Park is more, and I'm not picking on P Park. I'm just going to use it as an example. Maybe P Park's more, but the truck can get 4 turns or 5 turns in a day. Versus if they came to South Jersey, they went to Pennsylvania, that same truck's only getting 2. So there's logistics and location plays such a big factor. Um, that's really the driving force, not just for not just for the disposal or the recycling of those aggregates, but also the end market for those aggregates. You've got to be have a location that's also as easy to get in as easy to get out. and to have that demand, there's sand is tough in North Jersey and New York. So whatever sand you can pull out of there is in my opinion gold. Where in South Jersey we're just we have tons of sand but no aggregate, right? So there's a balance there, but the transportation component of it is absolutely insane right now. The rates change day to day. The availability of the trucks isn't there anymore. The requirement of all the special permits they need, whether it's the Part 364 in New York or a BIC, or New Jersey's Act 90, and or Delaware's Delaware Solid Waste, and Pennsylvania's, Jersey's Act A901, Pennsylvania's Act 90. There's a lot that goes into being able to transport those materials that people don't understand until they get a price to do it.
Lauren, what are the typical hurdles, would you say, for the expansion of the use of recycled aggregates? Is it regulation? Is it, buy-in from customers? Is it an education piece? What would you say is the biggest hurdles right now for increased use of recycled aggregates?
Yeah, I'd say a mixture of all of that. I'd say, especially in the beginning with our small local community, it was just the education, right? They were a little hesitant hearing that, we're washing contaminated soils and now this material's coming out of it. Over the course of the first year, we were able to prove to all of those people using analytical data that we're taking to show, this material is clean. We're, putting our money where our mouth is in that sense. We're not going to just fly under the radar doing the wrong thing. So people have gained our trust in that regard, or we've gained their trust. So that's gone a lot better. I'd say the biggest hurdle now that we've seen is definitely from a regulatory standpoint, as well as these engineers that are writing specs. They are writing into the spec and have been for the last probably 50 plus years, natural aggregate. And that is the biggest hurdle to get around. Not being able to have recycled aggregate be acceptable, especially in situations where, it's like a local project. Maybe they're building a sidewalk and they want to put the stone into concrete, or maybe they want to use it for backfill, or recycled stone, or a drainage stone. It still says natural aggregate. And that natural aggregate is so hard to come by these days, especially a lot of these sand pits on Long Island, as well as any quarries that we have locally. They are limited in their resources because they've been open for so long. There's a lot of regulatory issues going on where people are concerned about them staying open and potentially polluting the environment. We won't get into that here, but knowing that, we want to save that material, right? Why do we want to be putting a natural aggregate just straight into a hole for drainage stone when it should be saved for really high technical projects like high-rise buildings and things that are going on in the city, bridges, all of that kind of stuff, when we could instead be using a recycled aggregate, saving money in the process. It is a recycled aggregate, so it is cheaper than the virgin material that comes out of these quarries and pits. But we see time and again that every time we come across a spec, it says natural, and proving it out that our material might be just as well suited for the task is an individual process every single time, even with the same contractors, even with the same regulators. Every project, you're going through that entire process again and again and again. It's extremely time intensive and cost intensive. So that's our biggest hurdle.
So, John, to that point, what can the CDRA do to sort of change attitudes going forward with, engineers or regulators?
It's education. It's a lot of conversations. It's education. I know that I'm involved on a task force right now with the EPA, U.S. EPA. We're meeting every 2 to 3 weeks right now, and trying to help them understand the benefit of using recycled materials versus virgin aggregates. We're depleting these quarries in the country right now, and they're very difficult to not just maintain, but even to permit to open a new one. So you'd want to preserve that as long as we could. But it's getting people to listen to it. And to Lauren's point, there should be no reason in the world that you couldn't use recycled materials in non-structural application. Sidewalks, curbs, streets, things of that nature. I'll be the first to say that I believe it could be used in structural, but we've got to be able to walk before we run. And I think just communicating them and when you look at the break test for these materials, there's times where they're breaking better than virgin materials. So, again, everybody's like, well, it's recycled. We don't want to, we want to stay with clean, brand new stuff. We need the legislation to listen, to incentivize it, or at least a percentage of recycled materials, aggregates be allowed to be used in a mixed design or things of those nature, of that nature. But when you look at all these contractors out there, especially in the building industry, not so much roads and bridges, but the demolition of big high-rise buildings and rebuilding of them, they're all trying to get these LEED credits, and there's a way to do that. But there's such a reluctancy because there's just not enough information made public, in my opinion, yet, because this is kind of a new, I'd say late 10 years of data that's out there. But I think we're turning the corner. I think that they're willing to listen. Um, but we've got to figure out a way to incentivize people not just to use the correct disposal facilities, but also use the products that those facilities are creating from the material that we brought in.
Yeah, I mean, I think anything that can minimize the expansion of landfills is worth a serious exploration, because that land could be used for a million better things than landfill, and no one wants to live beside a landfill site, So, um, so we'll sort of wrap things up. Back onto the CDRA, John. How does one get involved, and what is the CDRA's plans for next year?
A lot of big plans for next year. I can tell you that we are working on it. Probably I'm involved 4 to 5 hours every day. I've had Andy Johnson, our executive director, traveling the country, actually going and meeting with facilities, hearing what their thoughts are. But a couple of the things that I'm pretty proud of that we're doing now is we're actually creating what's going to be called an I&E Academy. And that's going to be a resource for not just our members, but really for anyone that wants to learn more, not just through white papers, but actual processes and education of different things. And that'll be an add-on in 2026 for the CDRA, because we do believe that we need to educate more and not just educate the public, but even help our membership educate one another, talk about the mistakes that they made, talk about the wins, the losses, the technology, the equipment, those things. The beautiful thing about what we have going on is all of our members will talk to each other. They may be competitors at some point, but for the most part, they're pretty open. They I can't tell you how many tours that we've done. Where they just open up the doors and let us come in and see what's going on from anywhere in the country. So it's a group of people that have the same vision, that are desperately trying to get the message out there, but educate people along the way. And as far as becoming or involved in it, it's very simple. Visit the website at cdrecycling.org. Um, there's that'll take you to our homepage, which we have a brand new website this year, which we're pretty proud of. And you go from there. But we have committee meetings every month, whether it's end markets or Lawrence committee, the recycled aggregates committee. Then we have a gypsum, very specific committees for gypsum and shingle recycling. We have a legislative committee, which something new's going on with that next year, that I'll be announcing at our board meeting next week in Charlotte, North Carolina. But a lot of exciting stuff. And we kind of brag that if you walk away with one idea from one of our meetings, it paid for your membership. And I truly believe that, because I know that I'm a lot smarter today than when I was when I joined 12 years ago, I guess it was now. My mission as the president currently has been, I want to give back. I want to pay it forward. I want to showcase the members that are out there doing this cutting edge stuff like Lauren's team. And, we've got to figure out a way to win across the country. What works in one state, we need to be able to share that it can work in another state. We're seeing that, recycled asphalt shingles right now. There's a big movement. Some higher percentages now of asphalt shingles going into asphalt designs in Michigan and Illinois and a little bit in Ohio and Pennsylvania. So we're starting to see that gradual increase. And I don't know exactly what's driving that market. Maybe it's just an amendment to using virgin products in those things, but certainly the shingle recycling technology is changing, very similar to what Lauren's industry has done with the concrete and aggregate washing. So a lot of good stuff going on right now. Pretty excited about 26, 27, and 28.
Very good. And Lauren, can you tell us more about the Recycled Aggregates Committee that you're chair of? Who's involved and how does one get involved?
Yeah, definitely. So it's a new committee that was started only a few months ago. John took the lead on, the initiation of the committee, which was great. I'm really glad he asked me to be part of it. So far, we're still definitely a new committee. So we're trying to get to know our membership, trying to understand what their needs are. Every 2 months we meet and we tend to have a speaker from, a variety of different places, whether that is an equipment supplier or potentially, regulators, maybe somebody in the research field. And then we try to give an opportunity for everybody to really talk and collaborate, seeing what's working for them, what maybe hasn't worked for them, and what might work somewhere else, just kind of trying to do an exchange of an idea. But moving forward, we're going to hopefully get a better understanding of what everybody's really looking to get out of it. And hopefully we can get a project going within the next year or two where, we can kind of do some of that work towards acceptance, education, and all of that that we've discussed during this podcast.
Very good.
Well, hey, Neil, I think that Lauren's very humble, right? I've gotten to know Lauren a little bit. She's pretty quiet until she talks about something she's extremely passionate about. But I hope that Lauren at some point showcases Basilico's facility at an aggregate recycling committee meeting, because I think that opening that up to showcase what they've done in Farmingdale and P Park would be a tremendous benefit to our membership to hear their story and the success of their story. But she's kind of humble, so she's put everybody else in front of her. but I'm hoping in 2027 or 2026 that she'll have the Basilico family on and kind of tell their story. And again, it's been very interesting and cool to watch that happen. Not just in Farmingdale, but in P Park. I mean, they are just Class A facilities and very professionally run.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I have some personal experience with Basilico, and I can say that their team is fantastic from Michael Basilico down. So great team, and I know that they'll make it. They are making it a success, and they were the flagship really for having a turnkey wash plant in North America, washing really bad materials. So kudos to those guys. So. Well, thank you. And on behalf of, McClanahan, I want to say that we really appreciate our membership with the CDRA. I know it's only been a couple of years, but it's always been a great organization to people to talk to. Your events are very well organized, very professional. And the key thing that I always take away from your events is the atmosphere. It's very warm, and people are very, comfortable sharing ideas and thoughts and trade secrets almost, but in an effort to help each other. So we appreciate our involvement with you guys, and long may it continue. So thank you for having us as part of your association.
Glad to have you.
Thank you for listening to Groundwork, a McClanahan podcast. Be sure to follow us on social media for updates and more content. See you next time.